This is Wilson Morales from Black Film TV talking to Tunji Kasim for his role as Adolphus in obviously the big series on Netflix, Queen Charlotte, A
Mm.
Bridgerton Story. How's it going?
It's good. It goes well. How are you going?
Good. The Bridgerton series has obviously been a big hit for Netflix that they've obviously started off sequels and spin-offs and so forth. You're playing the role of Adolphus. How did the role come about, and had you been a fan of the series prior to this?
It was just a regular audition process that I went through. I got the audition scene I actually got that kind of really wanted me to get involved, really kind of sparked me to get involved in the project was the first scene between Charlotte and Adolphus in the carriage that opens the series. And it's just a fantastically written scene. It was like a six-page scene that Shonda had written. It was such fantastic writing that I had to put my tape in and see what came of it. As for being a fan of Bridgerton before, I hadn't actually watched Bridgerton before I did this job. So this was my kind of getting this job was my first proper introduction to the Bridgerton world. Obviously, I knew about Bridgerton because it's such a huge social phenomenon. It was hard to miss it. But this was my kind of, in many ways, my first proper introduction to the world of Bridgerton.
So when you were going out for this role, and it's like almost anything else. Like if you're going to try out for a comic book movie, you have to watch the previous ones. You don't just go in there and say, "Oh, let me play catch up now." It's
Yeah,
like so that way when obviously when you're talking to producers and the casting people, they want to know how much of an awareness you have.
yeah.
Playing this role of Adolphus, how would you describe him? It's a big thing. I'll ask that next question. How would you describe Adolphus now?
I think Adolphus is an interesting character. I think he is the best way I could describe him is he's a man of his times. I think he does a lot of things that people might in 2023 think are very questionable, but he does them for very good reason, and there's no ill intent behind what he does. For example, setting up an arranged marriage with his sister, that's something that's kind of frowned on in modern society. But at the time, it was a very useful tool for gaining allies. In this case, this small German province was gaining the partnership of the English Empire, which was the most powerful in the world at the time, and he couldn't really say no to it unless he really wanted to, piss off the King of England. So he kind of had to. He was kind of forced into a situation in many ways, but also it does benefit him and his people that he rules over. Kind of brings wealth and prosperity to his province having such a partnership. So I think what he does for good reason, and he doesn't do it for any malicious intent. I think he loves his sister dearly, but he is the head of his family, and that's the kind of tricky position he's in. Does he choose between his emotional well-being or his kind of the well-being of his country and his province?
It's almost like the first season of Bridgerton, where you had one of the guys, the elder brother, in charge of the family. He has to make a decision as far as what's best for you. How much research did you do in terms of Black Germans, from that time period?
I didn't actually find. I mean, outside of the theory that Queen Charlotte herself had black blood in her, I didn't find anything related to the family. There's no kind of charted history of that. I didn't actually find many Black Germans in my research either of that time period. That were recorded in the history books. I'm sure there were many, but actually written down in the history books, not many. I did some research into Adolphus himself, Frederick, and it's funny because you do so much research, and I suppose Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte is ultimately, in many ways, a fictional world. It's based on real life characters, of course, but a lot of artistic license has been taken with these characters. And so, of course, it's useful to do the research and know the history that existed because you never know what you'll find, and you might find a little kind of hook that gives you an insight into the character in some way. But I think a large part of it was having to lean into Shonda's writing and what she put down on the page and the world she was creating, rather than relying on some historical documents. Because she kind of she takes those characters, those real life people, and kind of does her own thing with them, and that's really what you need to get on board with. I found it was definitely better to get on board with that and her writing, which is just so fantastic, than try and shoehorn in historical facts or historical whatever about the characters.
Hmm. How was it working with the cast? You don't have a lot of scenes with everyone. You obviously it's you and a few other the other actors on the show, but
Mm.
I'm sure there's a
Mm.
point. where it was either a table read, at a premiere, at a special screening, where you got to see a majority of them. What's that dynamic like?
I think, yeah, fantastic, fantastic group of people. I think we're really blessed to, I mean, not blessed because I think casting did a fantastic job. They very purposefully picked people that had great chemistry together. Obviously, most of my scenes are with India, but I often cross paths with Corey, who's also fantastic, and also Sam, who plays, the young Brimsley,
Mhm.
and also Freddie. And it's interesting because it almost felt like there was two casts, like we were filming two different series because I was based in the past and the older Queen Charlotte's story was going on as well. So we would usually film in the mornings, and then the older generations would film in the evenings, and so we'd have this kind of weird crossover bit where we have no idea who each other are. We're just kind of saying hello to each other, and we actually don't have any scenes at all together. But it was a kind of weird, funny dynamic. It felt like two different shows were being made at the same time.
Do you think that if there's another follow up to this or whatever series, either they will age you up or they'll bring in another person to play you as the older version?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that would be interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, that would be interesting if they did.
You know,
If Adolphus went on to have an older self as well, maybe it might pop into the Bridgerton world. Who knows? I don't know. There's been no talk about a second season so far, but obviously this has been quite successful. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think in Shonda's head, it was always a limited six-part series. But you never know. There's always a possibility. There's lots more stories to be told
yeah,
from the
if
characters.
Netflix starts putting out stories like this got 3 billion, views,
That's a
give them what the
motivator.
people want. You never know, you
That's a
know.
motivator, definitely.
But
And
for
yeah,
you as an actor,
fans have responded fantastically to well to it, so that's really good.
yes, for you as an actor, knowing that the first clip that they posted that they sent to the world was you in a carriage, you
Mm.
know, how thrilling was that as an actor that like as they're promoting this series, you're in that first clip.
Sure, yeah, it was fantastic, and I think obviously you're relieved that, oh, cool, maybe I did some good work then if they're putting this front and center. So you're relieved that it's been received well and the powers that be kind of approve of what's been done, and most importantly, I suppose that Shonda was happy because I think her writing in this is just fantastic, and I haven't watched too many Shonda projects, but this has to be some of her best writing, I think, because it is so good and so motivating. And it was a pleasure to work on scenes, 6-page scenes on TV or streaming in this case. Because often, in TV and streaming things, they're quite short, snappy, attention grabbing onto the next thing scenes. But, in that first episode alone, she's got two like 6-page, almost 10-minute scenes. And she just lets the characters talk and lets their kind of relationship unfold in front of you. And that was fantastic for me as an actor. I love working on those scenes. So yeah, it was very affirming, I suppose, in many ways that was the first. Those were the first clips that were shown to the world, and I think India is just absolutely fantastic. And so yeah, it was a great pleasure and a great joy that was the first content that was kind of released, and people loved it.
Hours fitting into the costumes. Obviously, for the ladies, it's to die for, because they're getting these amazing costumes that people want to see when they go to, ballrooms and stuff like that. For
Yeah.
guys, you never know. How was it for you, when you're getting tailored up?
I mean, those costumes are expensive. Every single scene was a brand new costume, and they were thousands of pounds. Those costumes, but they made us look fantastic, and they were literally tailored to within an inch of your body. We had these, costume fittings, and they were very much tailored to each person's individual body. And you're in so tight, and you've got these fantastic waistcoats that they had us in, but you couldn't slouch. You couldn't. There was none of this. There was none of this like relaxed posture. You had to be composed the whole time, which created a few kind of backaches because my body's not used to having to be so upright so much. But you kind of get used to it, and ultimately we looked fantastic, and we really very much looked the part. Of the period, and the women in particular, those dresses they have them in, just stunning.
I'm thinking back now, you think about Adolphus, and Charlotte is young. She clearly says she's 17.
Hmm.
Does she know her place in terms of culture when she comes in to the British royalty? and obviously, she's still young and learning. She's got a lot to learn. But was there? Did you create yourself a backstory as far as okay, I'm gonna hand you off to this guy who's
Mm,
basically white, but
mm,
remember where you come from.
mm. I think I think Adolphus is fully aware of the consequences of what this marriage would be, and the kind of consequences for Charlotte. There, I mean, right from the first scene, he kind of flags that no one that looks like them has ever married one of these people, has never married into this very white British institution. I think he's aware of that, but I think he doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't. It's a precarious situation for them, no doubt. But I think ultimately he has faith that Charlotte has the strength of character and the willpower required to see her through, which she ultimately does. And I think similarly for Adolphus being, a person of color that's in such a privileged position as to be the ruler of a country, I think he must be fully aware of his diplomatic relations with the rest of the world. And this is kind of, fleshed out in Shonda's world, and not necessarily what it was like back in the day. So it is a fictionalized reality, I suppose. But Adolphus is he's no dope. He's fully aware of the kind of power dynamics that must exist within Britain and must exist within Germany. So I think depending on based on the background they must have had, they're pretty strong-willed and strong independent people, and so he ultimately has faith that Charlotte, because of her background, because of her upbringing, can go forth into this world, into this position, into this situation, and he can entrust that she will find her feet, as she so brilliantly does.
You shot this some time back. Obviously, it's out now. Is there anything else you got coming up that we should see you in?
I've got at the end of the month, actually coming up pretty soon, is the Nancy Drew. I filmed the last series of Nancy Drew season 4, which is our final season, and that's coming out at the end of May. So it'll be very exciting for kind of fans to see the conclusion of that. That was our last and final season. I did all 4 seasons of that, so that'll be fun for that to be released and coming out. And then after that, we'll see what's on the horizon after that.
What do you prefer to do? What makes you say yes to the projects you want to do, or maybe get offered to you?
I have to be able to connect with the characters. I have to have a sense that this is a three-dimensional character. I'm very put off by flatly written characters that kind of rely on cliche. What was fantastic about Adolphus was immediately within that first scene, you see the conflict with him. You see the struggle between his personal and his professional, the diplomat in him, and the cost that and what that costs him. And I suppose that cost is something that's very human. The conflict in every person in every situation. That's what attracts me to parts. And also, the writing has to be good for enable in order for that to happen. So great writing and fleshed out, rounded characters that have a lot of meat to them. Because I haven't got time for kind of cliched, flatly written characters, unfortunately.
I want to say congrats on the role, congrats on the series. Obviously for you as an actor, it's visibility. That's your calling card. You can take it to elsewhere. Obviously, if we can't catch you here, we can catch you in Nancy Drew. So we
Mm.
can say, oh, he stays working. One way or the other. So that way, whatever you do next, people will now know who you are. So congrats again. Best of everything else, and we'll talk down the road in your next project.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Wilson. Take care.
Bye.